likely get 3-bet from this player who I assume, given the spot before where he had just 3-bet folded to an under the gun opener, he's definitely going to have a wide enough range to warrant defending sevens. Uh, on this flop, I think it's close. I could I could fold and I could peel. Um, Without too much information on somebody, it's sort of like a coin flip. I don't mind going either way. Reasons to peel would be that you assume he's likely going to bet all of his air because it's a dry flop. He's also likely, this is just a kind of general assumption about players at 5-10, but you assume that he'll check behind hands like queens, jacks, and tens. Um, Another good thing you have going for you if you call is that it's fairly credible that you yourself can have a king and you likely won't get barreled, but at the same time, your hand has pretty marginal equity against a lot of the hands you can be c-betting as bluff with. And when I say that it's likely you won't get barreled, it is of course still possible. Say he turns a flush draw, he has queen jack, queen 10, 6, 7, 7, 8, any of that stuff, and thinks that you are peeling hands like that on the flop. And then even though you can have a king, your range is still mostly comprised of hands like sevens, because if you peel sevens, I mean then you peel sixes, you peel all sorts of hands like that. And there's just simply more combinations of those, and maybe some gut shots you could have been floating out of position with, uh, to make two barreling an okay play if you're only calling with the king or better. So 8-9 suited in the small blind here. It's not like a super standard call, but I'm calling it a fairly decent amount of the time. And jacks against the guy who just got an 8s for 200 big blinds. Definitely 3-betting against him. On this flop, it is a spot where I would likely bet my air, but at the same time, you don't exactly have to bet jacks here for balancing purposes. And more importantly, if I do bet jacks here, I can't really expect to get called by many worse hands. Like, if someone has a hand like 8-9 suited, I guess, on the flop, or maybe a straight draw like 9-10 suited, it's plausible they would peel, but it's also possible that they turn their hand to a bluff on the later street, and it doesn't seem so likely that I would end up winning the pot. So yeah, when it goes bet call there on the turn, I pretty much have to fold. If it had just been bet and then follow the hawk had folded, I think it's close. I'd still likely fold. Frederick has shown himself to be a bit passive, but uh, yeah, I mean that's basically all the reason you need to fold there. It's possible he won't bet like semi bluffs. Okay, so he made a somewhat loose turn bet for my perceived image of him. I'd imagine though, even if he's betting all of his pairs and straight draws, I still probably can't call the turn, especially if he's going to sometimes bluff club rivers or something. Yeah, just being out of position with not too much going for me, kind of just a spot where you gotta give up. So 10-7 suited here, I called versus follow the Hawks under the gun open, and called the flop. Pretty standard so far. Could 3-bet or fold pre-flop. Chose to call this time. Not so sure I like my turn bet here. I mean, I know what I was thinking, which is basically just it's pretty unlikely for him to have a better hand, given how aggressive he's been playing. Like you'd expect any overpair 8x. I suppose the exception would be a hand like ace-7 suited, but you'd expect all of his better hands to bet the turn. And excuse me. When he checks, I'm basically just betting for value. But at the same time, is it really likely that he check calls the turn with a draw or ace high? No, I don't really think so. Um, it is possible he has a hand like 4 or 5 suited and calls one. Uh, if I had reason to believe that he thought I might be floating on the flop with a hand like any overcard, any Broadway hand like that, then it's possible he might check raise me in a spot where he's not repping a whole ton because I expect him to be betting all his value hands on the turn. Uh, so it's kind of a whatever spot. You can go either way. I would say default should be check, but there's certainly nothing inherently wrong with betting, given that it looks like he doesn't have anything and is likely just going to fold. And at the same time, if he bets the river on overcard, it does put me in sort of a tough spot because I don't know his frequencies there. But keep in mind that while betting is reasonable, the main reason is not to protect your hand, it's just an added benefit. Oftentimes, if you're betting strictly to protect your hand, you're probably making an error, with the exception of scenarios where your stack is equivalent or slightly less than the size of the pot. Because then, in those instances, it can be such that by checking, you're just allowing a guy to draw for free to a 6-outer in a spot where you don't necessarily want to be doing that. Not a terrible idea to 4-bet there with king 5 off, given that it's Bell Boxy's, I think, first 3-bet at the table. I know oftentimes when I myself sit down at a table, I'll 3-bet, especially when deep the first time somebody opens, just to kind of see how everybody's playing. I mean, you can't gauge like a really great reaction just from one single hand, but you certainly find out more about how everybody's playing than if you just keep folding. The main thing to consider, though, when deciding whether or not to 4-bet there is what types of hands he's 3-betting with. If he's 3-betting the opener with a lot of hands that I would generally advocate a call with, it's likely that he can flat my 4-bet, which is obviously not something I really want to happen when I have king 5 off. But if he's 3-betting